5 old business B, Harris County Jail noncompliance. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I would like to recuse myself from this conversation.
Record so noted. Dr. Force is recusing himself from the discussion.
I believe we need to ask for a recommendation on Coryell County if any action is necessary.
Before we begin on Harrison County, is there any recommendation regarding Coryell County, Mr. Wood?
Mr. Chairman, we would request that at this time no action be taken and that we continue to work with Coryell County in regards to maintaining compliance that they have since attained. The remedial order will remain in place, but we are not requesting that further action be taken on that. Again, as I mentioned, they will be subjected to escalated enforcement due to their compliance history, and we will be conducting additional on-site comprehensive inspections, and we'll keep the commission briefed on their progress and their status. No action at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any questions from the commission? Thank you. 5B, Harris County Jail noncompliance. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, Harris County has been invited to appear before you based upon the notices of noncompliance that have been issued. At the last meeting, a remedial order was issued regarding staffing at the Harris County Jail. They've been issued notices of noncompliance due to housing and holding inmates in excess of 48 hours through the booking process. There have also been notices of noncompliance issued due to death in custodies in which there were issues identified with the care, custody, and control of the inmates. There was an additional on-site inspection that has occurred, and there was additional areas of noncompliance that were identified. At this time, Inspector Shelton, who has resigned and is now back with Bell County, and the replacement will be coming on board. The inspector for that area is an interim inspector, and he is continuing to maintain contact with Harris County officials, but the stop-by inspection that Inspector Shelton conducted in June indicates that they are addressing the items that were previously identified. And at this time, I would like to ask if any Harris County representatives are present to provide us an update on their efforts to come back in compliance.
Good morning, Commission. Appreciate your time. I'm Philip Bosques. I'm the Assistant Chief for the Harris County Sheriff's Office. I'll just go through an update and then entertain any questions the board may have. Today, just to give some reference, we have housed on-site in our facility 7,931 inmates. We have outsourced at 3 different facilities, 1,207 inmates, with 112 beds across those 3 facilities that we intend to continue to move more inmates out. And we have about 250 sitting in our processing building down at JPC. For staffing, we have, as of this morning, 178 open jail PCNs or jobs. So we'll take it one at a time from our inspection. The holding cell areas that Director Wood just referenced. So we've been tracking that on a monthly basis since the inspection. I submitted a report just this morning to the commission. So we had a high of 11% that went over the 48-hour period. Glad to announce for July, we just closed that report out and we're down to 0.3%. So the context of that is, so in July, we housed 3,763 inmates. We received in the doors for processing 8,528. So out of the 3,763 that were housed, 11 persons in July went over for some reason over that 48-hour processing. We have a team that's dedicated with our partners from our medical vendor and mental health vendor. They meet weekly to refine that process. And so what we're finding now, or what our goal has been for the last few months, is to take ownership of over every process that we have to get it within that 48 hours. And so what we see is usually a holdup with our the DA's office, clearing charges. It kind of backs up our system. We're on it. Like I said, we're pretty proud that we're down below 1% as of July. On April 17th, one of the compliance that we're talking about was due to an inmate that was in a bathroom area. So I won't say we're unique in the point that we have open booking, but I will say there's a lot of facilities that open booking, and we kind of stretch standards over those areas. So this bathroom is on a lobby, if you'll kind of picture that. So a person waiting to be processed in got into the bathroom, and unfortunately he was able to commit suicide in there. So we were written up for not conducting checks on a holding cell within 88 minutes. We've resolved that. Again, I think we're stretching the standards to cover areas that aren't built into them. The biggest part, open booking. So in remedy to that, we put in electronic monitoring or QR codes that just like it was if it was in a cell. And so now we have staff members that do that. We have an electronic record. Those records are part of the packet that we submit to the jail commission. So we believe that we've completely addressed this issue, and that's from the April 17th special notice of noncompliance. So an update for the March inspection that had several items that we're in noncompliance for. So holding cells, again, this is tied into inmates not being processed within 48 hours. So I've kind of given you the numbers and the progress we've made, and down less than 1%. We also received some areas of noncompliance. Inmates were not seen within medical within 48 hours as required by our operational plan. And also in health services, noncompliance for failing to follow physician's orders. So we've really come together with our health provider and our mental health provider and taken a look at those. So I'll give you some points to address those. Harris Health has brought in they've implemented an electronic medication ordering packaging system, which has really sped up and it's streamlined the KOP. So we feel that that's addressed. Inmates, we audit those. So we have a keep on person audit, which is indicating 95% of patients receive their KOP medications within 48 hours of dispense date. The 5% who did not were either at court or a no-show for appointments. So we're targeting that to see how we can make those corrections. Also, a non-KOP audit indicates 100% of patients were administered their non-KOP medications within 24 hours of the provider order being placed. So again, we feel that those two have been corrected. Those audits are part of the weekly packet that we submit to the jail commission for review. Again, as we address the parts with our medical care, we brought on, or I should say our health provider has brought on a medical subcontractor, Yes Care. So they brought in 14 new providers. And what this is going to allow is Harris Health will now, or their plan is within the next 30 days, is to start pushing some of their regular providers up to the floor. So again, to increase the time or reduce the time that they're seeing patients, because the health providers won't be stationed just in the clinic. We'll have them on the floors, and they'll be able to do triage and medical services on the floor. And so that subcontractor has already brought providers in. They're being put in our JPC, which allows doctors that were there or any kind of medical provider, I should say, to be able to be utilized other places in the system. We also started a zero suicide initiative framework campus-wide, and that's just to increase training for our officers. We're also pushing out information to inmates. And the no-show system, we revised the daily report. So if inmates weren't showing up for appointments, now we have an auditing system in place to show why, and we can go to the floors and follow up with them. Let's see, it talked about Parada. So another big issue that was tied directly into staffing was our observation rounds. So in the last 60 days, we've brought our percentage up to 99.6, 99.7, completion rate, or on-time rate for core track or our electronics tracking system for the system. And to give you a little context on what that percentage is, on a daily basis or a 24-hour period, complex-wide, we do over 17,000 rounds on inmates, which equates to about $500,000 a month. So when we went up from 99.1, 99.2 to 99.6 and 7, it's a vast amount because we do so many rounds. The rounds that are missed, we have our staff concentrating on documenting why a round was late. Were we dealing with an inmate disturbance? Were the officers in the tank, which what we're finding, and we're identifying those trends. A lot of times the officers are in the tank interacting with the inmates in a direct supervision way, be it they're talking to them for needs or appointments or just that interaction, and the officers are not getting to the electronic core track round. So again, we're going back with, okay, we need to document that down, that the officer was actually in the area. So that's the update on all the non-compliance issues. We feel that out of the 6 or 7 spread among the 4 reports that are currently on the jails commission's website, that we've addressed about 5 or 6, and we feel confident that we will be reaching out for a review on those to get back in compliance on those issues. Any questions?
Ask the commissioners any questions?
Yeah, Judge.
Yes, sir.
I do have a couple of questions. Good morning.
Good morning.
You mentioned earlier, and as I went through this last night in a hotel, I was reading it all, and the questions I was going to ask, I'm not going to ask.
All right.
Instead, I'm going to ask questions from what you just discussed. When you said stretching the standards, what does that mean?
So in reference to that, I personally, and I mean, it's my opinion, open booking, those would come on. You don't find standards strictly to cover open booking, in my opinion. So being written up for somebody going into a bathroom like it was a holding cell, it's different. If you look at our area where this happened, it looks like a big lobby or a waiting room. Chairs, the inmates aren't behind closed doors in these areas, and we just have bathrooms along the wall that they can freely get up and go and use while they're waiting to process. So that's what I mean by stretching to, well, there was an inmate in there. They're waiting to be processed in. We've received them, so I won't argue that we took custody of them, but they're not in a cell that we're not going by and seeing. It's a newer concept. We have a lot of jails with open booking, and honestly, I think that we need some standards where professionals come in, the commission, and work with jails to look at the open booking, because it's in a lot of jails now, and we need some regulations for those versus pulling things that are a detention setting out into an open booking setting.
Does any of those standards, stretching of standards, cross over to providing medication to inmates? Is the first question. The second question is, does any of the stretching of standards involve the question of health and welfare of the inmate? In other words, are you stretching standards when it comes to those two areas?
To provide, no, I believe
medication as the inmate is required. In other words, you just don't have enough people to do it.
No, I don't think we're stretching standards in that area. I think to what we were written up for here, I believe that the evidence was there, and we don't have an issue with that.
Okay. Does any of it involve health and welfare other than medical? Overcrowding is an example.
I think at this point, if you look at our numbers, I don't think we're in a traditional overcrowding. That's because the county has supported us by outsourcing the 1,200 to 1,300 inmates, and that helps with our staffing as well to provide what we need. Directly for medical, again, I think that we've increased all those services, especially on the front end. We provide, because we have the ability to, like a lot of large jails, we do more comprehensive medical and mental health services before inmates are processed into housing than anywhere in the state, I would venture to say.
My final question is, it's, I noticed there's no one from the Commissioner's Court here with you. I was just wondering, is there a particular reason why?
I wouldn't have an answer to the Commissioner's Court or the judges.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from the commission?
Yes, sir. Just looking at the report that we read, you've been found out of noncompliance 4 times, 2022, 2022, 23, and 23. So it appears you had a pretty good run up to that point. Is there anything you can put your finger on why the last 2 years have been so difficult and you guys have been found out of compliance in so many areas?
I don't want to jump on the COVID bandwagon, but I think that was very impactful. It was impactful to the courts. It did drive up population. And I think we're facing the same problem that we see across the state and across the nation when we talk to jails, staffing and trained, qualified officers coming in. So we're seeing that high turnover rate. And so I think those are some of the biggest factors, the rise in population and officers that when they do come in, Commissioner, they're not staying around a long time. I think the state average, we're seeing jailers leave the profession just shy of 36 months. So we're losing that institutional knowledge. Like I believe one of the public comments was trained officers that used to see it a different way. So we're fighting with that. We're not the only ones. I talked to counterparts across the country, and it's that staffing issue.
Is there a line of communication or cooperation with your Commissioner's Court? Because that's something you're right, we're all seeing this, but as a commissioner of, and not a county your size, but still a decent-sized county, we're having to make consideration for paying more. Do you guys feel that you do have a good line of communication with your Commissioner's Court?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few months ago, about 4 months ago, the court voted and approved a $4,000 retention style, we don't want to say bonus, or retention. So as detention officers stay with us at 6-month increments, they receive $1,000 to stay with the county. That's also for an officer that's hired on, again, when they reach 6 months. And through the work of the sheriff and a few of us with our budget staff and the court staff, we've submitted some good numbers for the upcoming budget cycle. So we're hopeful that the court will continue to support us. And again, if we didn't have any open jail spots, I would say there's an issue. But the court has supported us on that. And now they're starting to say, hey, we need the money. The spots are there, but how do we get them in? How do we increase recruiting? How do we increase retention? So there's strong talks with the county administration, the court, and of course the sheriff and his command staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the commission? Mr. Wood?
Mr. Chairman, I had some questions for Assistant Chief Vasquez in regards to their continuing efforts to achieve compliance. And you mentioned the number of inmates that you currently have housed out of county, and you mentioned your population today, which is significantly lower than your approved capacity that is located within the confines of Harris County. If need be, has the county explored the possibility of housing more inmates out of county to assist you in your efforts?
So we're in talk with the county. I've had meetings with the county purchasing agency, or agent, I should say. So yes, there's some ongoing to solidify what we have and possibly increase. But those are in talks that I wouldn't want to say in open session.
Okay. Do you have a general idea on how much the county has been charged and paid to house inmates out of county since you began that program?
Yeah, I don't want to throw out a figure. I know for one of the vendors we were using, it was going to be in the range of $30 million.
One of the things that I think that could possibly be impacting your overall jail population is due to the fact that you are housing inmates out of county. For those that are housed out of county, you're housing in Garza County, Post, Texas, and then a facility in Louisiana. Is that correct?
And since the last commission meeting, we opened up, same vendor, LaSalle, but we're using the downtown Beaumont facility.
Okay.
We started off with 48 roughly a month ago. We've increased that up to 72, and we're going to top out there at 96. But we're in talks with them to see if they can find additional bed space, again, tied in with the talks about expansion.
Okay. For the inmates that are housed in these contract facilities, are you conducting, or is there the opportunity to conduct court proceedings, whether they be preliminary hearings or any other plea type deals, remotely via video, or are you being required to transport these individuals back to Harris County?
There's a lot of those, the abilities in place. We still mainly, what we see from the courts is we transport them back.
Is that a preference, or is that necessary due to some requirement in the law?
I think it's a preference by the courts. But they do have that ability. They have tablets deployed in all of those facilities. So that's what we're hearing from the inmates. They don't have a problem getting with their legal counsel, and they like the family interaction.
Okay. At the May meeting, you mentioned that you had 182 vacancies at the jail, and you were reporting this morning that you were down to 178. Is that correct?
Yes, 178. Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the things that we'll be working with you in the coming weeks is trying to ensure that we have a good handle on the number of jailer positions you have allocated to the facilities, and if that represents how many vacancies you have for direct inmate supervision. I know there's always discussions about where these individuals are actually assigned. So I just wanted to hopefully have a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and that number is going down and not up. Some of the other things will be information that we'll be requesting. You may not be able to answer these, but I think it starts setting the plate for the information that we would like to begin receiving. Have you reviewed your average length of stay for your inmates? And where are you at on that? Do you know?
It's still, it hovers around 200, give or take.
200. Have you compared your average length of stay to other metropolitan urban counties in the state?
We're 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times. Okay. Does the county have like a criminal justice planning committee, coordinating council, any sort of entity that reviews your inmate population?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We meet on a biweekly.
You meet biweekly. Are they reviewing the steps other than what occurs at the jail, which is driving your inmate population in an effort to address this issue?
Yes.
Would y'all be able and willing to provide us copies of those reports?
I can see what the minutes of those meetings. Yes, sir.
Okay. You mentioned something, and it might be a good, real quick educational moment. You mentioned that you have direct filing that occurs in Harris County. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you give like a real brief summary of what that consists of? Because I think you're one of the few within the state that does something along those lines, and it may be of benefit for the commissioners and other people to understand what that consists of.
So my understanding of it, because I'd never dealt with it before I got here. So as a police officer, we make an arrest, we fill out the paperwork, we go and take them to the jail and do whatever booking, and we're out. In Harris County, they have to request permission for the charge to go through from the DA's office. So an officer will come in and they send it over to the DA's office. So until the DA accepts the charge, there's a lot of things that we can't move forward. Now, we do start medical and mental health and all those services while we're waiting, but some of the legal and the processing has to wait until the DA's office gives us an A or accepts the charge. And so again, if we're not hearing from them until 36 hours in, we don't have that full 48-hour window that most jails in the state. So that's the direct in a snapshot.
We may look into that to find out if that is hindering the process and creating unnecessary bottlenecks. I don't know what a solution on that would be, but I do think that it needs to be looked at.
One point
yes, please.
Right with that. So in the last month, we've got support from the DA's office through the Commissioner's Court and everybody else working together. They have put on one 8-hour shift per day of special DAs, and they're coming in and working on diversion desk. It's mainly tied to mental health. So I want to say about 3 weeks ago, and forgive me for not having more current numbers, they were able to divert 88 folks that would have been coming in. So that desk is set up. When it's manned with somebody from the DA's office, the officers are pointed to go there, and the DA's on site. But a lot of it is tied to the mental health diversion.
So I know that whenever JPC was originally envisioned, there was many processes put into place to include spaces for these sort of programs to occur in an effort to address what everybody realized would be an increase in inmate population just simply based upon the increase in population of the county. Are you saying that there's not always like an assisted DA at the jail?
There's always there. This was in addition to.
Okay.
And again, so we could really start using the Edema Diversion Center. We have multiple things like that, and that's what we feel is really helping drive this whole that 48-hour. Because the ones with mental health issues, you know, they can take a long time to process it.
Okay. You've given us some information regarding the length of time individuals are spending in JPC and that you've reduced the number of inmates that are not being able to be processed through within 48 hours, but you are still exceeding the 48 hours in some cases. Is that correct? But it's below 1%?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's the, 0.3.
One of the other things that I think that we would like to have available to us, because we recognize the fact that the jail is just one piece of the criminal justice system, and you deal with some factors that are outside of your control. Do you know if there's any data or if we would be able to receive data regarding the number of cases that are disposed of by the courts on a weekly basis, and also have that broken down basically on the number of cases that are disposed of for individuals that are in your custody, in your jails, along with those that are being disposed of for individuals that are out on bond? Because I'd like to get an idea of, are they focusing on the individuals that you're housing? So we'll be requesting that information as well.
When you get that, so as part of working with the court, they approved 5 positions. A lot of them are analysts, so we're having them review certain process like that. We have them meet with the meeting with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So when you send that request in, we'll get those population analysts on that, and we'll break it down and get the information.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I have. As far as the recommendations, we'll be requesting all the information that I've asked in regards to the processes, along with the possibility of housing additional inmates out of county. I know that may not be a popular approach, but we need Harris County back in compliance, and if it means additional inmates being housed out in order to do so, that is something that we have no issue with recommending. But I would like to remind the county that due to the fact that you have failed 2 inspections within a 12-month period, you, of course, will be subjected to the escalated enhanced enforcement. And we'll be requesting that you provide an official plan of action from the sheriff's office, but it will also require the county judge to issue a letter of concurrence in regards to your plan of action, and then weekly updates until you are back in compliance. So we will include that information to you regarding action taken this morning. Due to the fact that we do not have members of the Commissioners Court here, then I would be reluctant to throw any additional questions or take any additional action, but Harris County will be subject to a unannounced special inspection in the very near future, at which time we'll be able to review the staffing plan that they have provided, and we will be able to then come to the November meeting with the recommendation. I would remind the county that they are under a remedial order to comply with minimum jail standards, to include providing the appropriate number of staff required to operate the jail in compliance with minimum jail standards.
Okay, you need a motion for that, do we not?
Due to the fact that there is currently a remedial order, I do not believe any motion is necessary. Is that correct?
Thank you. I have one question. Does that Criminal Justice Committee, do they get the jail commission reports when you all get them?
I would imagine they do. We share that with multiple departments within the county.
I would just think what we've heard today would be helpful in trying to correct some of the problems down there, that everybody's included in the jail commission reports. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission?
No.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.